Speaking of sort of what's happening in the political world, do you have a sense of why? This is a big question, but in this moment we're in, there really seems to be a lot of emotion built up around gender identity and sexual orientation issues, especially around gender identity issues. It just seems to be such a motivator or an accelerant in some conversations. I mean, we just seem to be kind of in a moment where this is front and center for a lot of people, and I'm sure people in the LGBTQ community, being on the front line, feel it most of all. But as a sociologist, I would love to have your take about what's your perception about what's going on in our country right now that's made this such a motivating issue for so many people.
It is a big question. My sense about that is with all of the fast changes that are happening in our global culture around politics, economics, cultural things like LGBT uh, narratives. When we go through a lot of these changes, it really just eliminates the fractured um, ego. It eliminates the tenuous um, what's what am I looking for? It eliminates the fragility of our politics, which also finds its fragility in our family units. And so when there's a lot of insecurity, and most people do walk around with heaps of insecurity, uh, when they're faced with something that they're not familiar with, like trans issues or transitioning or having same-sex attractions, if that's new to them, all it's going to do is create a greater discordance in them. And now, instead of becoming about me coming to terms with my discomfort, it's about the problem of those people who are different and who have made my life difficult, when really it's about the insecurity that's being eliminated within the individual and within the families and culture at large. So it's an opportunity, I feel, for people to really shift the narrative into, instead of seeing the other person who's different from me as a problem that I need to address or deal with, is I look at myself and find out, why is it that I'm having such a difficulty with someone who's different? And so it's no longer about gender identity and about sexual orientation. It's about, where is it in me, the discordance within myself, that finds this difficult to grasp or accept?
Yeah, there's this sociological term that's very useful. It's anomie. It's French for the sense of normlessness, and it was used over 100 years ago to explain when things change rapidly. When we go from rural to urban or agrarian to industrial, there's this sense of like the rules are flowing out the window, and now I'm flailing, and I don't know what's going on, and the tendency is to want to go back to the world I know, make America that again. But there's also the other side of that, which is now there's this whole new thing to explore, and it's exciting. For some people that want to go back to the factories, that I understand that impulse because we know that world. But also, if you're an entrepreneur, it's like a blank slate. There's this whole new economy that's there for you. So it is really in how
Mm.
we emotionally go through these periods of change. And I think for a lot of people, especially around gender identity, they're confused. They've grown up with one thing, that sex and gender are the same thing, and now the rules have changed, and it's an opportunity, just like you say, it's an opportunity to kind of have this conversation, instead of the freak out, which I think is kind of what we're seeing a lot of in our society. So it's great to have
Mm.
people who can guide folks through that conversation in a calm way because It seems to be so explosive. I mean, I've been around the block a few times, and it's been fascinating to watch just in the last few years the sort of national conversation around gender and gender identity, and how there's people that get it and there's people that are pushing back against it, and there's some people in the middle who are just aren't sure how to talk, how to make sense of the new terrain. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you're a part of that.
Yeah, I think social media certainly has amplified this
Yeah.
narrative, and it's easy to hide behind a keyboard to maintain some degree of anonymity. But it seems that there's an explosion of "I'm righteous in my opinion,"
Mm.
and if there's a government um, embodiment that would say reinforce this sense of, well, I'm the victim, or I'm the one who's been disenfranchised, that just muddies the waters, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And there was a conversation I had with some folks over a social media post, and I was brought into the post maybe a few days after that post had been circulated in conversations and comments that happened. And my reply was being asked a question about this explosion of gender identity issues. I said, it's only explosive because of the framework in which you're operating in. If we were to take gender down from its lofty perch, I think we would have a different take on it. And it sort of ended the conversation, I feel, when I said that, because it took this sort of agitation in the language around there's a problem to solve to, yes, is gender, has it been put on the lofty perch? And is it really that significant? When in reality, that's what we've been entrained in when we're quite young, is that there's male and females look like this and sound like this, and males look and sound like that. And that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
But as we know, it's not the end of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a lot. It's on some levels very simple, and on other levels incredibly complex, because we tie into ideas about patriarchy and ideas about the need for some people at least, to have clear boundaries between categories. I mean, this, in Oregon, it was written into the Oregon Constitution. Not only what was racism, but the word mulatto was used in the Oregon Constitution in 1859, which is a category that we don't even think about anymore. Mulatto. My daughter is mulatto. The notion of being biracial has been somewhat normalized, but 150 years ago, the idea that there was someone who we couldn't put in this nice little category of white or black was causing heads to explode.
Yeah.
So I think there's just an interesting psychological profile that we're going through as a nation on these topics, and so we're going to have a lot of conversations on this, I have a feeling.